Okay, welcome to Stampscaping 101. I just spent 2 hours or so, I'm guessing, I kind of lost track of time here, doing this scene. And this scene was one that I've always wanted to play around with. In terms of the lighting in here, we've seen photographs of kind of a forest of trees where you're underneath the canopy and there's, I don't know, probably early morning, I would say, due to the angle of the sun, and you see these crepuscular rays, you know, kind of streaming through the landscape, and that's something that I've always wanted to play around with. I don't remember doing that before, but I've thought about it a lot. And finally thought, okay, it's time to get around to that one and kind of play around with it. I didn't know if adding these beams was about kind of stamping everything out, coloring it, and then going back in with some kind of white pigment ink across there, or if it was a matter of taking the stamp image, okay, and then kind of figuring out where it's going to go and figure out where the lighting is going to be. And if the lighting was going to be right here, coming across here, I would have to kind of wipe off some of that ink in those directions facing that light, okay, and that's what I did in this case. I had to figure out where I'm going to stamp this, where the light is going to be, and with a little bit of planning, okay, it's going across this way, that way, so I have to think about it like that. So when I ink this up, here's my finger on this side, I have to kind of wipe that area across like that with a paper towel before I stamp it out, and that kind of gives me a head start in terms of defining those light beams. The next one was the smaller version of this, and it's going to go in right here, okay? So if the light beam was in here, before I stamped that out, I inked it up and figured out where that lighting was going to be, and I just kind of slipped a paper towel under there and wiped that off, stamped it out, and there we have kind of the beginnings of the beam. And then I've reiterated that beam running across there with a little bit of pigment ink in here, as you'll see in this video if you watch it. And then the other thing that really makes this scene effective for me was kind of adding the shadows in the same direction as those light beams are going. Okay, so I have a couple beams of light up here, and then I have the shadows going in this, and you see that they're all kind of heading into the same direction, okay? So, but I really had fun adding a lot of different texture in here, using some alcohol-based pens, additional stamps down here, Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White, which I've really come to love, and just kind of adding all of that in those trees, really giving it kind of a rich surface to that bark, you know, to define the textures of that, but also using those same things to kind of reiterate lighting direction. So that being said, what I'm talking about is adding some shadows on the sides of the tree, the far part of the tree from the light source, and doing the same types of things with some additional texture in here, okay? And doing the same thing down here, adding a little bit of highlights and whatnot to reiterate kind of the lighting scheme. And those all add up to kind of a really fun textural end result. And the lighting came out okay, but it really became about the textures for me. So you never know what's going to happen in the course of doing a scene and what direction it's going to take. But I don't know. It's all kind of fun in the process of discovery. So anyways, I hope you enjoy this scene if you choose to watch it, and thanks as always for tuning in to the channel. Okay, there's a type of scene that I've been wanting to do for a while, but just haven't gotten around to it. And that's one of those scenes that you might see a photograph of, and it's where there's a lot of, you're like in a forest, and through the canopy of tree limbs and leaves overhead, there's some light streaming through the scene in front of you, and it's where you can see the beams of light kind of broken up by the different trees in the area, and you might see like the light coming in front of a tree, so it's really where there's a lot of suspended particles in the air. It's usually early morning or something like that, or maybe later in the evening, where the light is lower on the horizon, so you get those kind of dramatic angles of light beams coming across the different elements within the location. So I'm going to try that. Now, one of the things is that I'm trying to decide if I need to do that with something like pigment ink and dabbing, you know, actual ink over the front of objects, you know, where you would have these beams of light going, or if it's a matter of inking up a design and then kind of planning ahead where that light is going to be and saying, okay, here's a beam of light here, inking this up, and then wiping that area off on the stamp, okay? One way is going to require a little bit more planning than the other, but it could save us some time in the long run if that's the execution to be made. So this is kind of a study. Well, I don't know. You can say that all my scenes that I do are studies. You know, I've done kind of similar compositions before and similar techniques, but this one is kind of a different look. But it's, I don't know, I just haven't gotten around to doing it, but it's not an unfamiliar look. We've all seen that type of photograph before, so let's see how it goes. Okay, I'm putting my rubber on my tack and peel mounted acrylic block. You can hear this right here. See how tacky it is? It sticks to that block just really nicely. This tree's going to go this way, so got a piece of hair on that. I'm going to keep this one really simple in terms of the color scheme. I'm going to keep it pretty monochromatic because, I don't know, I just need to see how this concept's going to work without worrying about color at this point in time. Alright? So we're visualists, we're going to be more of a kind of a black and white visualist in trying to figure out this concept here. Okay, so let me try it a couple different ways. Okay, this is the larger of the images like this. Let me see. This is mossy covered trunks. Okay, so if I stamp this about like that, there's going to be a light source from here, and let's see. Alright, so it's going to be coming down this way. Okay. I have to think in reverse, so wiping off that ink there. It's going to look really strange, I think. Okay, here, and let's say here. Let's have a couple beams of light coming across these trunks here. I have to kind of just imagine it. It's going like that and like that. Alright. Boy, that's going to look weird. It's going to look weird as far as the impression of this goes. Hopefully it looks cool in the end, but we never know. But when you're playing around, you don't have to think of your scenes as masterpieces going into it or something like that. I generally think of my scenes as kind of experiments, and if they come out good, then all the better. But if you think about it in terms of an experiment, you're much more likely to take chances and risks and to really not worry about the outcome so much. Yeah, I know, we all want these pieces that we work on to come out looking nice, but, and, you know, I mean, when you're making a card for someone or something like that, that type of notion comes into play, but when you're just stamping for yourself, I always find it's a really good spirit to be in to kind of not worry about kind of the final result and just get involved in the process. Okay, I think I got those lines kind of decent. Ideally, let's say if the light source is right here, see these lines right here are kind of going back in this direction, right here. And these ones right here are kind of like this. It would have been better if the angle was a little bit lower, but so be it, you know. It's good enough for now. Alright, so let's see, those trees are about like so. Do I have this one in front of the beams and the beams are coming in back of it? Or what? Or I can have these here and I can continue the light streak kind of right in here. Let me see, it would go like this. Okay, let's say, for instance, these trees are in front of the light source, that beam, and these ones are in back, so it's kind of coming out from here and going this way. Alright, maybe I can have that light source kind of in here, and there could be a little bit of beams of light going that way. Maybe not. Or maybe I can just have that there and this over here. Okay, let's see how that would go. Or I could put the beams of light kind of at a farther point, like out here. Alright, so, alright, I'm going to do something for the sake of this piece. I'm going to put a little mark on the back side of this piece of rubber, 2 of them, so I can get kind of the angle, so it's going from right here to right here. So when I wipe that ink away, I'll have a better idea of how to do it. If you're doing it like this and you start wiping it away this way, then it's like, oh, wait a minute, this goes this way, so it's like reversed. So anyway, it's a little bit of a cheat guide for me, or a reminder guide. Oh wait, I can't see it that way. Let me see, I'd have to put it here in the front. I'm stamping early today. My brain doesn't really start working until much later. And then much more late at night. As far as how much it works, not saying that it works great. Alright, let me see here. Wiping like that. Is that it? No, wait, that's... okay. I think I did it reverse again. Darn it. Like I said, it's early for me. Okay, so I need to come down here. That's why I'm doing this cheat guide here. Alright. I need to do it right here. Okay. And right about here, about that branch right there. Wow. So, as you can see, it was a good idea for me to do that. Now, which way did it go? Okay, I've got multiple marks on here now. Okay, it's up this way. Okay, so where are my guides? My guide is right. Yeah, it's right there. Okay, got it. All right, now it's going to be wider on this end. I don't want to take off all of the ink, but I want to take off, you know, a decent amount so that the beams are kind of apparent. I don't want it to be too subtle, because they aren't in those photographs I've seen. Alright, now that one right there, wiping off ink, shouldn't have taken so long. I don't know. Gotta get my brain kind of configured for scene in reverse, or planning in reverse. Normally we're stamping the whole thing out, but this one I have this kind of this light beam coming across that way. So see that? It just kind of continues up that way. So we can kind of get an idea of where one of the beams is going to be. And then I'll add in, you know, another beam down here or something like that. But that one's going to be the main beam. So, I don't know. So as far as a concept goes, I think it's looking okay so far. All right, let's go for the large one again. See, I didn't take it off of this block because I didn't know if I was done with it. But let's see. I'm not going to use this whole stamp, but I'll go like about like so, maybe. So just this middle one and this one here on the left, because it'll be on the right when I flip it over. Okay, maybe I'll tilt this in slightly instead of going like this. Maybe I'll tilt it in a little bit because it is on this left side of the scene, frame, whatever, card. Just for compositional reasons, have them kind of tilted in like that. If everything's tilted out that way, it kind of gives the scene a little bit of an imbalance, which could be okay sometimes. You can do a scene that has like great kind of a visual dramatic imbalance. But in this case, we'll go for a little bit more balance in terms of kind of visual weight, I guess you can say. Okay, now this one I didn't wipe off because I'm just going to have it here in the foreground, okay? Alright, that little light area in the tree is kind of there inherently, worked into the design. Okay, so we have those beams in there. I think I can see the concept of how that's going to go. Maybe. I'm planning out the inking stage. I'm thinking I need to put some kind of general tone down. And then it's going to be like taking a piece of paper like this or something and toning out the background a little bit darker so that when I remove this, we'll have this kind of beam running across the front. And I'll do the same thing from the top. So, I don't know. I think it's going to work. We'll see. I'm not worried about it, though, if it doesn't. Not that I'm not hoping. I have hope. I don't expect, though. Okay, this is the Sedge filler stamp. And these trees have enough tone in them where I don't need to mask them off. Okay, if I'm going with something solid and I want to put it in there, you know, that'd be fine. But if I'm working with something like an outline stamp or something like that, and I stamp it right over that, this tree's going to show right through, right? So, but this is the way these stamps are designed. I do not design these stamps so that they are hard to use, believe me, because I'm going to have to use these as much as anyone, and I'm not looking to create a lot of extra work for me to get in a, you know, kind of a, you know, a certain result. I want the kind of the most streamlined, quickest route to get to whatever desired results, and you know, that's what I consider fun, not kind of fighting with really any aspect of the entire process of creating something, you know, not just scenes, but any type of thing. Not that, you know, I want the learning curve to be in doing something new, not, I don't know, blending, you know, grass and trees together or something like that, you know. I want the challenge to be in doing something new like this scene right here. Okay, so here's some background trees right here. If I just stamped it right up the front, it's going to be on the front of it. So this one, I will need to do a little bit of masking if I want anything like that in there. I don't have to, but I might want them in there. Okay, now this is called the Leafless Pine, and I just want a little bit of extra texture back there, so it's not quite so open. I mean, we could leave it open. It would be a lot easier, but I don't think it would look as full, maybe, so let's go with this. It's a smaller type of object, and why don't I put it in the background? By doing it in gray, it'll stamp out, you know, in a lighter value than the black. So when I add some tones back there, I don't know if I'll be able to see this anymore, but we'll think about that when we get to it. Okay. All right. So Leafless Pine small and gray, and I tell you what, maybe I will wipe off some of the bottom of this right here. All right. Just in general, I see it's going to overlap a little bit of my trees that I stamped out, but I tell you what, I don't feel like doing any masking here, so I'm just going to wipe off some of these edges a little bit where they might overlap some of that black tree trunk, the mossy trunks, and you know, if a little bit of this gets into there, then so be it, but otherwise I don't think I need to worry about that, okay? So see that? No masking of the trunks needed. If I stamped it in black, I'd have to worry about it a little bit more, or, I don't know, not worry. I'd have to consider it a little bit more and maybe mask off a little bit of that tree trunk. But, you know, that's going to give me a little bit of depth in the background, so let's add a few more of these back there, okay, in between these trees. And let's see if I can kind of continue on with that notion of the light beams kind of obscuring a certain area of the tree. So let's say this one's going to go in here, and I'll say midway. Okay, I'm going to do it this. I'm just going to wipe off like that. Okay, if that's going to go there, I'm going to wipe off like that. Okay, and I can see where that's going to overlap that tree there. Same thing right here. It's just going to be a kind of a narrow application of this tree, I think. Wipe off some of the bottom of that one. Okay. Kind of an easier form of stamping, huh? And layering of background imagery. Okay. See that right in there? And see where I kind of obscured that area right there. Area. Okay. Now let's do something here. Let's just kind of wipe off the bottom of this and wipe it a little bit more right here. So that just the top of this is now inked up, and it's a little bit drier here and a lot drier down here. So it's just going for that top portion. And let's get some kind of trees in the mist back here. See how it kind of fades off down here? And see, you don't have to worry about doing any masking, right? Because it just kind of fades off naturally. And it gives it a little bit of atmosphere too, right? By not stamping out the entire thing. So, when you're doing sync stamping, just kind of, you know, you have to kind of get, you know, kind of in the mindset of looking at your imagery, and sometimes less looks better, okay? And what does that do? It gives you more mileage out of your stamps, you know, in terms of being able to use them in different applications and for different purposes, you know, based on your need. Okay, let's go for about halfway. And this is what rubber stamping is so awesome for doing landscapes, because of the repetition of imagery. You know, you can use the same tree over and over again in a scene or on a card where it's not so specific an object that that you can't repeat it time and time again, and you can use it many times in one piece, and hopefully it won't necessarily look so repetitive. Okay, that one's a real light one. I just put a little bit lower just so I don't get the, you know, like this picket fence appearance going on in the background. Again, these trees are going to be quite obscured, you know, by the time I add in some other tones in here. So, but they're kind of a textural, you know, difference in the background, which will be nice, I think, in the end result, no matter how kind of obscured they are. Alright, so let's go for one more in that open area. So it's like, I don't know, it's like there's a thicker grove of trees here, and then the background there's another kind of stand of trees. Alright, the light is coming from here, so now I'm up at the top of this tree. Wiping off the bottom like the trees are in a bit of mist, and maybe that's why we are kind of made aware of the illumination of that mist, with those rays kind of coming across on the front of those trees. Alright, so this is what we have right now. It's looking a little busy, sure, but that's to be expected because all of the imagery is in there and none of the tone, okay? So let's take a look at the toning process, and let's see if we can't bring this kind of concept together a little bit more and into focus. If this comes out, you know, decent and it's a fun process, then I might do it again and using more color. But I don't know, I'm someone that really likes black and white photography, so I don't mind the monochromatic look. The grayscale things have a little bit of a different spirit to it. I don't like one more than the other, but I certainly like kind of a utilization of kind of both types of looks for what my needs are at that given time. In this case, it's about an experiment, so I want it to be nice and easy. Okay, grayscale. We'll definitely use the gray that we used on those trees in the background, but Marvy inks are a little bit thinner than most other browns. Memento is a little bit of thicker ink. It's by Sukaneko. And Ranger inks would be a really great option for this too. And there's other brands out there as well. Anything by Clear Snap. I think they make the Stampin' Up things. Should have really great inks, you know. Clear Snap's a company that's been around for a long time. And I assume they're making the Stampin' Up pads because I think Stampin' Up owns them, so. Okay, so I'm not just going to ink in here like I normally do. Alright, oh, by the way, this is London Fog. I have to think of those rays and where those rays are going to go, so maybe there would be rays coming this way, and maybe down here somewhere. Maybe there'll be a ray in front of these trees where it's very apparent, and maybe down here where I didn't kind of wipe off these, maybe there'll be a ray behind it, okay? So, all right. This is going to look like, to you, I think, that I'm not really applying very much ink at all. And it's because this gray is very light in value, okay? Oops, sorry. But it is there, and I don't want to rush this process right here. Okay, I got to get this kind of this angle down here. You know how I always say you kind of turn your card for the purpose what you're, you know, when you're applying this thing. Maybe this one I have to keep it this way because I have to keep kind of a. Let me do it like this. I'll show you what I'm doing here. Okay, there's my kind of guidelines as far as this paper goes. Okay, right here and right here. And I need to keep kind of my eye on the source of light. So the source of light is coming from, let's see, it's going along this line. It could be in the scene itself, but maybe I'll have it out here, like that. That's not really it. There it is right there. Kind of X marks the spot. Okay, so I'll show you what I'm kind of doing. I'm kind of, all my shadows are kind of going along, kind of aiming at that source of light, okay? Coming across this way. It would be better if I worked like this way, but I don't know. We saw what happened with that one stamp. I got to keep this in my head about kind of which way this is supposed to be going. Okay. See these tree trunks right here, kind of creating the shadow going that way, so I'm kind of aiming that shadow up that way, so it'd be more like this. I have to get that angle right. Okay. Oh, I wasn't going to do it, but why not? Let's grab a ruler. I tell you what, better than a ruler. Let's use just another piece of paper here. Okay. All right, so let's see. And I'll do this right here. Okay, there's that ink. Okay. Now let's go a little bit higher. Okay. Can you see what I'm doing right here? I have this piece of paper at an angle going right to that, like that. Okay, and that's going to create that kind of line there. And I don't, you know, I'm not worried about like taping down this paper or, you know, putting a dot there. I can do this, you know, with my finger right here. Things don't have to be so perfect, you know. I don't need to be too meticulous about it, in other words. You want it to kind of be more free-form anyways, I would think. You know, I don't want a bunch of super hard edges, you know. Even though I'm going to start getting some of them, I'm going to smooth them out a little bit too, so. Alright. So there's those lines right there so far. Alright, now I need the bottom of this one, so. Okay, so if I need the bottom part of this beam of light, okay, I'm going to come up here like this, and bottom will be about like so. Okay. Let me take a peek and see what it looks like. Okay. Well, there's definitely a beam of light there, isn't there? Now let's go in here for this other one. It's really harsh though, so we'll soften that up here. Okay, let's look at that. This one up here is a little bit too big, so I'm going to shrink that down a little bit. Okay, about like so. Assessing. Okay, now it's not only in those light beams. The objects, I can't forget about them, need to be somewhat reflective of that lighting direction, so I'm going to put some tone on certain sides of these tree trunks right here, right? I'll put them on the left side of the tree trunk since it's being left. You know, the illumination, the lighting is coming from the left. So on the right sides, out here, we'll put some tone, okay? And I'll try to have this at a bit of an angle so that I'm not applying, I'm just doing this little bit right here, okay? And I'm doing that type of effect on these trees. So I want to reiterate kind of the lighting direction with the use of shadow. Even where the tree is illuminated, I'll still put a little bit of shading on the right-hand side. We can do some more with some alcohol pens too. The alcohol pen should be fun. There's a lot of gray tone, gray scale alcohol-based pens out there on the market. For what they use those for, kind of in the whatever industry outside of you know, the craft industry. It's probably the art industry in terms of doing visual comprehensives, you know. Okay, so you see our trees are starting to flesh in a little bit. So I'll show you what I did here. See on this side of this tree, it's a little bit darker, right? Same thing right here and here than the left-hand side, so hopefully it looks like the light is coming from that direction by doing that. Fleshing in this tree right here with a little bit more tone. These trees right here are supposed to be kind of in front of that light beam, where the trees in the back are behind the light beam, so that's why we can see the beam. Okay, I'm still just working with that one tone of gray. Okay, we can have some of that light in the background there as well, I think. Alright, let's try to move on. Or let's move on. And we'll move on to this other gray. Now, I don't know if I need my guides there anymore. I can kind of see where the light is being defined now. Where do I add this next gray? I'm adding it roughly in the same area that I did with the previous color. But it's just one kind of value darker, or two, or whatever. I think it's one. It's not too much darker than the previous color, which is a good one to transition into. I like taking my steps as far as the colors that I'm using kind of really incrementally so that there's a lot of control over it that way. And you don't have to jump up to anything, you know, too extreme right away. Everything kind of comes into focus, you know, in a kind of a methodical way, in this incremental type of process. Not that everything has to be that way, but I think the more time you spend with certain tones and really get things defined fully in those tones, the scenes can potentially look much more full and complete that way, from a color's perspective. In other words, don't rush it. Even if you have kind of this notion in mind, and if the scene, this notion of your final result is fairly dark, don't try to get into the darks too fast. You know, it's the lighter tones that kind of set the they set the I don't know, the foundation for lighting schemes, intensity in terms of how rich the end result looks like. It's always because of those foundation colors. Alright, so if we have a beam of light coming like that, it stands to reason that we'd have kind of an equal player in terms of that beam in shadows. So it's good we have a pretty hard beam, so let's do a hard shadow, right? The hardest of shadows are always formed with the strongest of light, right? Going back into those shadows on the trees, just reiterating the same type of thing with this ink because it's a little bit darker. It's kind of coming into focus a little bit, huh, in terms of our concept here. The darker I go, the lighter those beams appear by contrast. Okay, let's go for a little bit of a vignette type of effect around here as well. I'm liking the scene so far. I don't know. I mean, it could look better in terms of those light beams, but it's not too bad so far as a concept goes. Maybe a third beam would have been good in here. Is it too late for it? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I can kind of... I don't know. I don't want to push it in this one, because I want to see what this black will do now in terms of the composition. The darker you make certain areas, the lighter the lights will seem. Okay. And where am I doing this? Again, just in the same area that I established with the first color of gray, the Memento gray. I think I had a third beam up here, didn't I? Coming across those tops of those trees. But I don't really so much anymore, so that changed in the process. nothing real conscious of me to do that, but I think I just forgot that it was up there, so not really a big deal. Alright, so kind of working on those trees a little bit more. Trying to define the lights and shadow. Let's make this tree a little bit more dark so that we can see that it's clearly in front of that light, okay? Same thing with this one. I don't know, I could put a little tint of green or something like that down in that grassy area. I don't know if I need to though, but we'll see. Okay, strengthening my shadows down here at the base of the trunks. Shadows are really, they really can be a very key player in kind of the defining the spirit of the scene, because lighting is really a strong factor at times. So if you have strong lighting, shadows, right? The shadows in here are acting to ground those trees as well. They look much more kind of integrated and planted into that grassy area. Okay. Let's try to smooth that beam up there a little bit more. Okay. A little bit more weight, visual weight in front of with the shadow on these trees. Okay. Let's take a look here and try and figure out what this could use. I suspected that this will be, could use some foreground in a way. Maybe a little bit of additional texture. I could use a bigger block for this stamp, but yeah, that's good enough. This block has the tack and peel on there as well. Okay, just to kind of break up that space down there with some crisp imagery, I like to stamp out some other type of foreground, some kind of real spindly little image. I use the reeds a lot, but let's use the, what is this one called? Snowy Branches or something like that. See that down there? It's just something nice and crisp amidst kind of these softer forms, okay? Let's do a couple of them. Maybe 3. I like things at the base of trees too. It kind of sets them in, and there's a little bit more of a graceful transition between the land and this real vertical object coming out of the terrain. It just kind of softens that edge and that transition between the trunks and the surface. Okay. Here we go. And let's see, how about one on this side? How about 2 on this side? I can barely see it. Okay. That. I think I know what I'm going to be doing on this scene, though, in terms of lighting and whatnot. The pigment ink and some of the pigment ink coming across there, I want to soften those beams up a little bit, I think. This is the tiny rock stamp, you know, going for a little bit more texture. I love building up textures in a scene. Let's blot it off once and go for kind of a lighter impression. Tell you what, let's go for much lighter. Let's wipe off some of these larger rocks down here and use it for the smaller rocks right above it. Okay? And I'll blot it off a little bit because I'm going to be stamping it in this kind of more illuminated area in the background. Like that. Okay. See these pieces down here? It just, I don't know, it gives kind of more, oh, I don't know, visual interest to, you know, an otherwise, you know, pretty plain looking area. I mean, it was just sedge filler, which, you know, will work, but I just like adding different forms sometime down in this area. Okay. It's just a simple impression of it. Okay, let's see what this is looking like so far. Kind of interesting. I think I'm kind of leaning towards a little bit of green in there. I think it can bring it to life. It'll still be monochromatic for the most part, but I think some visual interest could be nice in there. I'm running out of batteries, so I'm going to pause and restart. Okay, I think I found a good candidate for my color. I like this Distress Peeled Paint color. And there's blue on this tip right here. Quick lesson in cleaning your tips. I'm just using a little bit of water. Okay, just some water in here. Just put your tip right into that area. Kind of press it down here though, press it low. Don't press it too much here because sometimes it'll put too much strain on that area of the wand. So if you do that over time too much, or if you're in a hurry or something like that, you know, these wands can snap, so they're just plastic. But with normal use, you know, they would never break. But sometimes if people are pressing really hard like that, you know, and you know, there have been snaps in the past. I don't know in people's homes, but like when we're at a make and take at a convention where, you know, things are running kind of 1,000 miles an hour, and you got new groups coming in. Sometimes I've even snapped a few when I've had like 3 tips and I'm just, you know, kind of like mass cleaning. Okay. And these tips can really hold a lot of ink. Okay, let's try some of this peel paint. I don't know what this is going to look like, so what I do is I ink up like that, and I blot off a lot of it before I go in here. Because if I just start adding a little bit of tone down here like that, it happens kind of slowly. Actually, I didn't take off quite enough. There we go. I like to dry brush it into my scene somewhat. By dry brushing, it means that there's very little ink on here, and you know, I can really see it apply in a very slow progression, or not progression, but I don't know, slow manner. Okay. I don't know, you know what I mean? It's just a little more gray-green now. There's, I don't know, a certain richness to it just by adding hue into a grayscale. You don't want to lose your lighting though, that's the thing, so kind of be careful not to tone anything out that was, you know, kind of meant to be light or lighter than other areas, okay? Alright, I think that looks pretty good. After all, these are mossy covered trunks, is the name of it, so I'm covering it in moss. And I did a lesson recently where I toned a monochromatic scene, just showing you that, you know, when you do these grayscales, there's a lot of options still, even if you've kind of defined all of the values and whatnot. You can still go into them and add a hue if you wish, you know. But what I say to that is, if there's lighting kind of established in there and you want to retain that lighting, then careful not to tone it all out. Okay, I don't know if I like some of that green on those light areas, so I'll kind of knock that back a little bit. But I like it everywhere else, though. Where I don't like it, I'll add a little bit of pigment ink over the top of it to obscure it a little bit, to kind of mellow it out a little bit. Okay. There's a ton of detail in these images, so when I do this, it looks, I don't know, it looks a little bit more kind of photoreal, although it's not photoreal at all, but I'm just saying it looks more photoreal in some imagery of in our line. I added tons and tons of texture to these, to the mossy tree trunks stamp. Okay, let's see. I'm getting a little bit more bold with the use of the green because I liked it. So if you like it, you can always add more. Okay. I don't know. It kind of looks like the light is coming in, right? Yeah, you can do this type of thing too with a, you know, going through the sky or something like that with like something like a lighthouse stamp. A lot of lighthouse stamps. I like all of them, but or I should say I haven't seen one that I didn't like. But a lot of lighthouses out there they're rendered like they're kind of out in the middle of day. But I made ours dark so that it kind of can be seen in a setting for which it has been designed to be used in. So I did it dark, but having something like this beam of light going across the sky would be kind of interesting. And that would be, maybe it would be even easier because there's a really definitive source of light really right within the scene, and it'd be easy to do these, that beam of light coming out of it. Okay, let's see here. I went on with that green. I think I'm going to tone over a little bit more with black again. In some areas it's real strong green, but maybe I want it more grayscale, kind of a darker grayscale. Okay. All right. I have no idea what pigment ink will look like on this scene, but let's check it out. This will be the Colorbox Frost White application of ink. Frost White is a pigment ink by Colorbox. It'd be perfect for embossing something. Colorbox ink is a kind of slow drying ink, which is kind of what you want, because when you apply it, then it gives you time to manipulate it after it's been laid down. Even if it dries completely on the glossy cardstock, if you don't like it, you can kind of rub it off and it'll come off just fine. Now I'm looking for a cotton swab. Here's my used one from a previous video. Cleaned up my desk here. Now I need to get reacquainted with where everything is. Actually, I don't see it here on my desk at all, so I need to figure out where I put it. Alright, now let's see, what are we going to do here? What is the use of this pigment ink? Okay, let me do something on this beam here first. Alright, now I talked about it in another video, but kind of the application of this pigment ink here is not a big, thick ball of ink, okay? We don't want to see these big balls of ink on our scene. It's really not in the spirit of what we're going after. So what I do, and I'm doing it on this dark piece of paper just so you can see, but I'm taking it and I'm making it, see now there's barely any on there, right? So I'm going to start off with that so that I can see a little bit of what I'm doing, but it takes a little bit of time to build it up, and that's kind of what you want. You don't want to go in here with the opposite type of effect and get a big blob of white paint. Now, if you do, you can just kind of wipe it right off, and it's not going to smear anything underneath there. But just in terms of the process and making it easy for yourself, easy doesn't mean faster, but it just means a little bit more methodical and careful. And just as far as careful, it doesn't mean it's precarious because there's hardly any of ink on here, so you can just kind of go straight on there. And I'm tapping kind of hard because there's barely any ink on there, so it just makes it so much easier. And you get the kind of the desired effect without really much effort at all. You know, in terms of having to watch out for anything. You don't have to watch out for anything if there's barely any ink, so It's just a matter of how much do you want on there, and if you like it, then you just keep adding more. More taps, okay? So adding this across some of these trees, it's making them a little bit softer, you know, and capturing some of that light. Sometimes I don't like this, too much of this harsh edge to this line, so I'm going to kind of obscure it a little bit too, like right in here, okay? Like right at the base there. So I'm coming into that light area, and right around the edge where it meets that darker area line, I'm just adding a little bit of pigment in there to cut down the contrast. It's not huge contrast, but it's enough to kind of define that line, so just obscuring that meeting a little bit more. Kind of putting some in that background tree a little bit. Okay. See, I don't like some of that green in there, so I'm just putting some pigment ink in front of it. And the pigment ink is kind of translucent. It's not covering it up completely, but it's just kind of knocking it back a little bit in terms of its value. Okay, there's this light beam in the background as well. And we can do kind of a similar treatment, adding a little bit of tone in the back. Maybe I'll put a little bit of light hitting some of these branches, being kind of backlit. Kind of interesting watching kind of some things develop when you're using like this type of technique here. There aren't too many there aren't too many times when I'm adding kind of light on dark. It's always kind of building up things like this foreground here, going with a darker image over a darker image over a darker image, you know, building like the front to back. But this is one of those instances when you can do something light over the top of something dark. And it's not really the use of negative space or something like that, but it is a different spirit because you're not removing, I mean, it is an additive process, but from a visual standpoint, you are kind of removing, you're obscuring, and to me, it kind of feels different. It's like, it's almost like it's using a different part of your brain, you know? And there's something very relaxing about it. In a way, it's almost like you're erasing, but you're looking for kind of different things, you know? You're looking for highlights, you know, rather than shadow or something of that sort. I kind of like what's going on down here with this area, but let's put a little bit of fog or mist at the base here, kind of being illuminated by that kind of bright light. One of the things that always kind of surprised me about, we call these crepuscular rays, okay? You can see them coming down from a sky, you know, when there's clouds in front of or a sun in front of, in back of some clouds, and you got some light beams coming out, or in a situation like this, but you know how it kind of flares out like that? Well, when it's doing that, it's kind of going back in perspective, but they say, in like this book that I have, it repeats the same thing over and over every time you see crepuscular rays, and it says that these rays, while it looks like they're emanating from somewhere and kind of flaring out, in fact, they are parallel. So, crepuscular rays are parallel rays, parallel beams of light. But they look like they're flaring out to me. That's why it was a surprise. I always thought it was like a flashlight. If you have a flashlight and you flip it on, you know. But maybe that's because the, I don't know, the reflector inside, I don't know. But out in nature, these are coming from the sun. They're parallel beams, I guess. Okay. Adding a little bit more ink, actually quite a bit in here. I'm getting more bold in this area because I don't mind it getting quite a bit lighter. I think it's looking pretty good that way. Maybe this tree in the background, I'll try to obscure it a little bit more. Another beam down here would have been good, huh? Well, that'll be the next one, maybe. The next time I do that, not the next lesson. I don't want to do this again anytime real soon. But I like what I'm seeing, though. I like what I'm seeing as far as kind of the look and I guess the process, the technique. I think it was good that we kind of wiped off some of these trees to get them started, because it would have taken me a lot more time having to tap additional tone with this. But if I did it that way, though, there would be less kind of planning involved. But I don't know, you saw the planning that I did. It wasn't too, you know, extreme. I just figured, you know, with some of these I just kind of figured out where it was going to go, and then I just kind of lifted it and wiped it like that with a paper towel. And there's other ways I'm sure you can do this type of look. This is just, I don't know, kind of one way off the top of my head that it, you know, could potentially work. Okay, how's that looking so far? I think it's about done. Let's add a little bit more kind of illumination on one side of the... Maybe that's what I would have done. I would have wiped off some of these trees on the side that was facing the light, not just in that streak, but maybe on some of the other branches. It might have been good. You know, I can kind of do it with this pigment ink too, and lighten up some of those sides, but if you just kind of do it inherently in the impression itself, sometimes it could be a more graceful kind of look in terms of that light. Okay. You know, as I look at this through the monitor on the back of my camera, it's one of the most, I don't know, kind of real looking scenes that I think I've done for some reason. Okay, now I'm tempted to go with the gel pen, but I think I want to do a little bit with this bleed-proof white. Has anyone bought me bleed-proof white? If you haven't, I'm telling you, it can be pretty fun. Bleed-proof white is this little bottle of opaque white watercolor paint. It always dries out when you don't use it after a while, but a few drops of water in there and it really reconstitutes it beautifully, and you're up and ready to go again. So, but anyways, that's a really good. Oh, I forgot about the alcohol pens too. I think that will add. What I'm doing in the meantime is I'm getting my paintbrush ready. It was kind of rock hard with some of that bleed-proof white in it from the last scene whenever I did that, but let's take a look here and see. We have some different pens. I like to use the alcohol-based pens. If you have something like Copics or something, these ones are the Marvy Lip Plume Permanents, but they come in all kinds of different hues and values, like these ones right here. I like a line that has kind of lighter values. What is that? I thought a little gnat just landed on this. I was thinking, wow, that must look really real. This little piece of lint or something. Okay, let's see what this one is. Cool Gray number 3. And I can just add a little bit of shading on some of these trees. And it's a really light value, so it's not putting in a real dark, you know, effect on anything here. But it's a way to get a little bit more detailed. You can add some texture into the trees. Some of these rocks down here. Let's see, let me zoom in for you. Some of those rocks, I have a little bit of that foggy look down there with that pigment ink, but where I don't, I'll come in here and I'll add a little bit of some shadows into those areas. There's texture to these trees up here as well, so you can kind of reiterate the texture that's going on. Oh, this one is a brownish gray. Let's see what that looks like. I think that would kind of look okay on some of these trees. I'm just kind of scumbling like that. I don't know if that's what it's called. It's more when, with like a dry brush or like a paint brush, but it's kind of like I'm just putting in a little bit of texture like that into these trees. Hopefully the trees just look more kind of refined and the texture defined. It's subtle, you know, because I'm not going with anything too dark. I can add those little shadows down here on some of these rocks. But everything just kind of gives it, I don't know, a little bit of added visual richness. Okay, I don't know if this one's going to show up at all. Melon. Yeah, maybe it will. It's just a little bit of a different tone of grain than that peeled paint ink that we used. I don't know if that one showed up at all. And camel or sepia. Maybe the sepia is going to be too dark. Let's try the camel here. A few little touches on these trees, because trees have texture, of course. Let's see here. I'm looking for, what do we have here? Elm green. I don't know if you've ever used that before. It kind of looks like almost looks like the peeled paint. Let's add a little bit down here to some of these rocks. I'll hold this up so you can see it a little bit better too. Okay, so see down here. There we go. So see that texture in there? You see those little dots and whatnot. But it looks a little bit more like natural bark, I think, you know, having that texture. And this was what it would look like, you know, at arm's distance. But I don't know, I'm seeing a little bit more of a passage of light coming through there. And that's really fun. All right. So, this is the peeled paint. I mean, not the peeled paint, what am I talking about? It's the bleed-proof white. Okay, so, this is what this is looking like. This is a number 2 brush. It's just a very fine brush. I kind of like going for kind of a dry brush effect again, because until I kind of figure out what I'm doing, but maybe I'll put some highlights on, you know, the sides of the tree, kind of facing the light. I mean, I have a highlight next to light, so this isn't showing up too much, but I kind of like starting it off like that, just because it gets me in the swing of doing the painting, you know? And I like adding the paint where you can't really see it at first. Just to kind of get in the flow. Alright. If I add too much, I can always just kind of tap it and it'll come right off. You can see it right there on my finger. See the little paint came off. Unless that's some of the, it's probably some of the pigment ink as well. Okay, let's add some of this down here and this on some of these rocks. Maybe a couple of these rocks can have a little bit of a reflecting light. I'll show you what that looks like here. See those little lines on top of some of those rocks? It just kind of, it gives them a certain illumination. There's some more rocks over this way, and on the side of the rocks facing the light, I can put a little bit of that opaque white on it, the bleed-proof white. A lot of calligraphers use this bleed-proof white in their lettering. I can add a little texture to the trees. Not just a darker texture, but kind of a lighter texture. Alright, I'm really, these little effects like this, I really have fun doing this, and this is becoming a scene that I really like so far. Or at this point, maybe. Okay, so let's take a look at some of those trees. Look at those trees in there. Those are really fun to work with. There's a lot of kind of a textural variety happening. Let me see if I can work this close. They're just subtle little marks, but kind of when added up, you know, they can make kind of a nice statement, visual statement. where one isn't going to do much, but when you add them as a kind of an overall repetitive mark, they kind of start to make a little bit more sense. In this case, it's kind of about texture that you might find on tree bark or something. Okay, let's see here. All right, well, I'm tempted to add on a few little highlights down here. Well, okay, let's just do it. Let's be bold. There's some of these branches down here. They're kind of in darkness, so I don't want to add too much to them, but yeah, I don't like that. Let me take some of that paint off. Maybe a little bit would be okay. Okay, so let's see what we have here. There's a little bit of lighter side to this one branch here, or trunk. So I can add a little bit of highlighting to that. Adding a little bit of texture. Down here in the grass, maybe there could be a little bit of dew on some of the grass. As I've mentioned in another video, whenever I stop talking like that, it's usually because I'm going into something and I'm really into it, and I haven't done it before, so I really don't know what I'm doing. So, I kind of have to have all of my attention on it. Plus, there's really not too much to say about it because I don't know, if I don't know what I'm doing, then there's really nothing to report until I can kind of see the end result. But let's see what we can come up with here. I'm noticing that if I put a few of these little dots transitioning out from that beam of light, it kind of softens that area a little bit, so I'm kind of adding a little bit of dots on each side of this beam right here on the tree, and I think that looks pretty good. Or a few little more textures within it. It's like you can kind of see more of the details in that part of the tree that's, being illuminated maybe. Okay. I think that is good enough. Wow. Let's take a look and see what we have here. That's a lot of texture. I usually don't do that much, but it was so much fun to do. I don't know, those look pretty realistic to me. Not that's what I'm going for with really any scene, but I think it looks okay. I like the textures and things like that are running in there. I think I would have had a harder line going in the background, like a harder beam, and maybe this beam would flare out more. Or I would have another beam coming down here. 3 beams would have been good just to kind of break up this area, but I think I'm happy with these two right here. I don't know, maybe a third one would have been more narrow or something like that, or something, or maybe this one would have just been wider, but I think that would have been nice, but I don't know. We wouldn't have so much of the tree trunks in there, and all the textural things that are happening in that space, but you know, this is just a quarter-page card, so it's, you know, it's fairly small, but I think something like that would have been good. Alright, so that being said, I really like the details that we can do in these trees, making them kind of this way. And it was very monochromatic, but I think it's rich in terms of the tones in there, and it's really quite minimal. I mean, we just went with, you know, basically green, right? But then we used a little bit of the pens, and the pens were light enough so that those were really easy to use, and just coloring right over what we did in kind of a variety of kind of earthy tones that were somewhat in there. I mean, there wasn't browns in here, but these kind of brown tones certainly do blend well visually with the tones that were set, you know, on the with the inks and whatnot. The pigment ink, as always, kind of comes in and really adds a lot to a lot of scenes. Sometimes it kind of saves the day for me in terms of finishing things. It softens things where I maybe don't want it too hard. If something's been stamped on there and added that I don't like too much, then I just kind of put a little bit of that pigment ink over it, and it obscures it a little bit because it lightens it up. It's not quite so apparent. And that was the case in here with some colors. You know, I didn't like some of that really bright green in there from the peeled paint added in such a, you know, degree that it was a little bit darker than I wanted. So pigment ink really comes in handy. And down here, the things that the pigment ink's doing, kind of obscuring some of that, and also kind of directing that light. You notice I don't have any pigment ink over here because this is all in shadow, so that pigment ink can kind of reiterate what's going on with the lighting. But I really had fun with those pens, though, and rendering these trees a little bit more with the alcohol-based pens. So mixed media, I guess you can say, but for the most part, it's mostly dye-based inks. So I don't know, a fun experiment, you know. I really like what's going on down here. I don't know, doesn't it look kind of realistic in some ways? Like photographic. Maybe not photographic in the sense that you're going out in nature, but maybe it's like a set design or something like that for something. And kind of studio lighting within the set or whatnot. But what fun, you know? What a great way to spend... I don't know, how long has it been? A couple hours maybe? But it's just a really fun scene to do. And a little bit of planning, more planning than I usually do because I don't have a streak of light coming across there. But the way this turned out, I'll certainly play around with kind of that idea more. I think it added a kind of a sense of drama in there. And in doing it at a diagonal, when you have diagonals like that within a composition, it kind of adds to the kind of the visual drama of a scene by having a slant like that. So a lot of verticals plus that beam of light running at a diagonal across them kind of adds to kind of the overall composition. So anyways, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope you kind of play around with this type of idea. And if you do, let me know how it turns out. Okay?